All right, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something pretty cool. It's from Gary Chapman's book, The Five Love Languages. We're going to be talking about acts of service.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got some excerpts here, and I'm really fascinated by this idea. I mean, like, can doing the dishes really be like a profound expression of love? What do you think?
Oh, it absolutely can be. Yeah. You see, for people whose primary love language is acts of service, it's not just about, getting things done. It's not just about checking things off a list.
Right.
It's about, feeling seen, feeling appreciated, feeling cared for. Um, and it's about recognizing that not everyone experiences and expresses love in the same way.
Yeah, it's almost like we all speak these different love dialects.
Exactly.
And we're kind of talking past each other sometimes.
Yeah.
And Chapman, he uses this, he tells this story about this couple, Mark and Mary. They were having some real struggles in their marriage. And they lived in this small town, China Grove, North Carolina. Can you imagine? Like, small town, probably life revolves around the local textile mill and Sunday church, you know?
Motown life. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got it.
And they just seem to disagree on everything, like everything. Hunting, church attendance, who should do which chores.
Mm-hmm.
Classic signs that they might be speaking these different love languages.
Absolutely.
What's so interesting is that before they got married, Mark was very attentive. He was always helping Mary with chores, projects, stuff like that,
Yeah.
which unknowingly spoke her acts of service language. But after the wedding, things kind of changed.
Yeah, after the wedding. Well, and that's what's interesting, right? Because before marriage, there's that almost like a honeymoon phase, even before the actual honeymoon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're putting your best foot forward.
You're trying to impress.
Yeah, exactly. So, he might have been doing all those things, not even realizing that it was speaking her love language. He was just trying to,
Yeah.
woo her. But then after the wedding, you kind of go back to your default mode of behavior.
Right. You kind of let your guard down a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And so then if those default modes are rooted in these different love languages, then, conflict is almost inevitable, right?
Absolutely. So, like, how did this play out with Mark and Mary? I mean, did they just learn to live with this resentment, or, was there a way to bridge this love language gap?
So they actually ended up going to counseling.
Huh.
And their counselor had a really interesting approach. He asked them to create what he called request lists.
Okay.
And these lists, each person would write down specific things that the other person could do to make them feel loved.
I like this already. Okay.
Yeah.
Request list. So what kind of things did they put on these lists?
So Mark's list was things like having a clean house when you get home from work, having dinner started, very practical things. Mary's list was a little different. She wanted help with things like car washing, vacuuming, mowing the lawn. So you can see already how, to her, these seemingly mundane tasks were really significant expressions of love.
It's not about, like, the 1950s, like what a wife should do or a husband should do. It's like, no, what does your partner actually want and need?
Exactly. It's about meeting those needs in a very specific way. And sometimes it means going outside of our comfort zones, right?
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
challenging some of our assumptions about, traditional gender roles.
Totally. And Chapman says this thing, and I think it's so powerful. He says, love is a choice, not just a feeling.
Right.
And then he goes on to say that, like, demands and criticisms kill love.
Oh, yeah.
But requests, they give it direction. So do you think that's true? Like, is love really that much work?
Well, I think what he's getting at is that, true love is not about being a doormat. It's not about doing things out of obligation or fear.
Hmm.
It's about a willingness to choose to love your partner, even when it's hard,
Right.
even when you don't feel like it.
Right.
And so, making these requests, it's almost like creating a roadmap,
Okay.
to guide you toward those actions that really resonate with your partner. So it's not just about doing the dishes. It's about doing the dishes with love and understanding.
That's a good point. So, this makes me think of a story in the Bible, the one where Jesus washes his disciples' feet.
Oh, absolutely.
So, like, what do you think? Does that story kind of fit in with this idea of, like, acts of service as a love language?
Absolutely.
Right.
Especially, if you consider the context of the time,
Mm-hmm.
foot washing was seen as a very lowly task, like something that servants did. And for Jesus, a figure of authority, a figure of reverence,
Right.
to wash his disciples' feet was a radical act of humility, a radical act of service, and a powerful demonstration of love that, went against all the societal norms.
Yeah, that's a good point. So even a simple act, but performed with the right intention,
Right.
can speak volumes. And, it's like those love notes that Chapman talks about, where you pair, a little note with the act of service, like, honey, I'm doing the laundry today because I love you.
Yeah, exactly. And, those notes, they just add this extra layer of intentionality.
Right.
They make it clear that you're not just checking a chore off the list.
Right.
It's a deliberate expression of love.
Yeah. But I bet there's some people listening who are like, wait a minute, does this mean we just become doormats? Just constantly doing things out of guilt or fear?
Yeah. It's a good question. How do you balance, meeting your partner's needs
Right.
with also, maintaining your own sense of self?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's a dance.
A good point. Yeah. You got to find that rhythm.
Yeah, exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot where you're giving freely and joyfully, not out of resentment or obligation. It's about understanding that, your partner's not trying to control you.
Right.
They're just trying to communicate their love in a way that makes sense to them.
So how do we actually apply this? I mean, if someone is listening right now and thinking, okay, I think my partner's love language might be acts of service, what are like some practical steps they can take?
Well, I think the first thing is, you got to start with a conversation,
Okay.
right? Like talk about love languages, explain what you've learned, and, ask your partner if this resonates with them.
Yeah.
You can even suggest reading the book together.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. It can be a really fun and enlightening experience to, go through that journey together.
Like learning a new language together.
Exactly.
You might stumble a bit, but you're laughing along the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, once you've established that this is important to your partner, then, remember those request lists we were talking about?
Yes.
Those can be really helpful because it's literally giving your partner a menu of love options.
I love that. Like, how would you like your love served today?
Exactly. But, remember, it doesn't have to be these grand gestures. Sometimes the most meaningful acts of service are those little everyday things.
It's like putting the toilet seat down.
Exactly. Or like, offering to help with the dishes, even if it's not your night.
Right.
It's just being mindful of your partner's needs.
Right. And what about, those situations where we start to feel like our partner's requests are sounding like nagging?
Yeah.
How do we navigate that without, getting defensive and feeling resentful?
Yeah, that's a tough one. But I think it's helpful to remember that, behind every, quote, nag is an unmet need.
Okay.
Maybe it's not the most eloquent way of expressing it.
Yeah.
But your partner's essentially saying, I don't feel loved right now.
Okay.
And so instead of getting defensive or shutting down, we should try to understand that underlying need that they're expressing.
It's like shifting from blame to appreciation.
Exactly. And, sometimes you can even reframe their request in a more positive way. Like instead of saying, ugh, you never take out the trash.
Yeah.
You could say, honey, I would really appreciate it if you could help me out by taking out the trash. It would make me feel so loved.
Okay. I like that.
It's just a subtle shift, but it can make a big difference.
Totally. And if you're feeling like overwhelmed or resentful,
Yeah.
like it's okay to communicate that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I love you. I want to make you happy, but I'm feeling, a bit overloaded right now. Can we talk about how we can divide these things up in a way that feels fair?
Yeah, that's a good point. We talked about it earlier, those little love notes, right? Combining acts of service with like a little written note. Like, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. It's really just about adding, a written expression of affection to the act of service.
Okay.
So, you could leave a little note that says, hey, I mowed the lawn today because I love you. Or I made your favorite dinner because I care about you.
Ah, I love that. Like it's a double dose of love, right?
Exactly. It just reinforces the message that this is not just a chore. It's an expression of love. And, imagine the impact this could have on your kids.
That's a good point.
If they see their parents doing this for each other,
right,
they're going to learn that love isn't just about words. It's about actions and intentions.
That's such a good point. Now, all this talk about love languages, acts of service, and everything, I'm wondering, is there a point where it becomes too much? Like, are we in danger of like going overboard and doing so much for our partner that we just completely neglect our own needs?
Yeah, it's all about balance, right? Healthy relationships are about reciprocity.
Right.
It's not about one person constantly giving and the other person constantly receiving. It's about finding that sweet spot where both partners feel loved, appreciated, and respected.
It's almost like self-care isn't selfish.
Right.
It's essential.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to fill your own cup so that
Yeah.
you have something to pour from. Right. If you're constantly depleted, resentful, your acts of service are going to feel more like burdens than expressions of love.
That's a really good point. So it's not just about learning your partner's love language. It's
No.
about understanding your own
Absolutely.
and being able to communicate that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. You got to have that open and honest dialogue where both people feel safe to express their needs
Right.
without fear of judgment.
And sometimes it's about, challenging those societal expectations that we've kind of internalized.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We might have grown up with these rigid ideas about like what a husband should do, what a wife should do.
Uh-huh.
But love languages, they transcend those boundaries.
Yeah. It's really about meeting your partner's individual needs.
Absolutely.
Right. And sometimes, stepping outside those traditional roles can lead to unexpected joy and growth.
Oh, totally.
Mm.
Like imagine a husband who thought yard work was a chore, suddenly discovering that he loves gardening because it speaks his wife's love language, right? Or, a wife who never thought of herself as a handy woman, learning to fix things around the house because it makes her husband feel loved.
I love that. It's like those acts of service become a gateway to discovering new parts of ourselves
Absolutely.
and our relationships, right?
Yeah. You might surprise yourself with what you're capable of when you're motivated by love.
Right. But let's be real. I mean, learning and speaking each other's love languages, it takes effort.
Sure does.
I mean, is it really as simple as just like following a recipe?
It's not rocket science, that's for sure. But like anything worthwhile, it takes intention.
Yeah.
It takes a willingness to learn, to grow,
Mm.
you know. Think about learning a new language. There's going to be moments of frustration, times when you feel like you're stumbling over your words.
Yeah.
But the more you practice, the more fluent you become.
Right. And the rewards are just so worth it, right? Because speaking your partner's love language, it can create this deeper sense of intimacy and connection and appreciation. It's almost like you've unlocked this like secret code to their heart,
Exactly. And remember, it's a lifelong journey, right?
Yeah.
The more we learn about ourselves, the more we learn about our partners,
Right.
the more effectively we can communicate love and build these amazing, strong, and fulfilling relationships.
I love that. You mentioned earlier, that our criticisms can reveal our deepest needs. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. A lot of times when we criticize our partner, it's not because we're trying to be mean or hurtful. It's really like this subconscious way of expressing an unmet need.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, if someone's always criticizing their partner for not helping around the house, maybe their love language is acts of service and they're feeling unappreciated.
Right. So it's like they're saying, I need you to show me love in this specific way,
Exactly.
but they're not doing it very eloquently.
Not very eloquently. And that's where understanding love languages can be so powerful because it helps us kind of decode
Right.
those messages behind our partner's words and actions.
Yeah.
Instead of taking the criticism personally,
Right.
you can view it as an opportunity to learn more about their needs.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right.
So the next time you're tempted to criticize, maybe just pause
Yes.
and ask yourself, what am I really trying to say here?
Exactly.
And then try to communicate that need more directly.
Exactly. It's about moving from reaction to connection.
I love that. This has been such an insightful deep dive.
Oh, it's been fun.
We've only just scratched the surface of acts of service, but I feel like, I've already got some good nuggets that I can use. What about you? What's like one key takeaway that really resonated with you?
I think for me, it's just that reminder that love is a choice, not just a feeling.
I love that.
And that those small acts of service, when you do them with intention and love, can make a huge impact.
It's the little things.
Right, little things.
So to wrap things up, let's leave our listeners with a question to think about. Okay, what's one act of service you could do this week to make your partner or, your loved ones feel appreciated? Take some time to reflect on that and take action. Even small gestures can make a world of difference. And don't forget to check out the show notes.
Oh, yeah.
For more resources and insights on love languages. We've got links to Chapman's book, all kinds of good stuff. So keep exploring.
Keep learning.
Keep learning and keep speaking the language of love.
That's it. And it's about recognizing, that your partner, they're not trying to control you.
Right.
They're just trying to say, hey, I love you.
Right.
This is how I feel loved.
This is how I receive love.
Exactly. So how do we actually take this and apply it? Like if somebody's listening right now and thinking, okay, I think my partner's love language might be acts of service, like what can they actually do?
Yeah, what are like the practical steps?
Well, I think the first step is just to have a conversation,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Talk about love languages, explain what you've learned,
Yeah.
and ask your partner, hey, does this resonate with you at all?
Right.
Even suggest, hey, let's read this book together.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
could be a fun experience.
Yeah.
Like go through it together, learn together.
It's like learning a new language together, right?
Exactly.
You're going to make mistakes, but you can laugh about it.
Exactly. And then once you've kind of established, hey, this is important to you,
Uh-huh.
then you can go back to those request lists we talked about.
Okay.
Those could be so helpful because you're basically giving them a menu of options.
It's such a good visual. It's like, what kind of love would you like today?
Exactly. But, remember, it doesn't have to be these big, grand gestures.
Right.
Sometimes it's the smallest things.
Yeah, like putting the toilet seat down.
Exactly. Offering to help with the dishes even though it's not your night.
Right.
Just little things to be mindful of.
Absolutely. What about those times where it starts to feel like nagging?
Oh, yeah. Like how do you navigate that without getting defensive and resentful? That's a tough one. But I think it's helpful to remember that behind every nag, let's call it.
Air quotes.
Air quotes. Yeah, nag is just an unmet need.
Okay.
It may not be the best way of saying it, but they're basically just saying, hey, I don't feel loved right now.
Okay.
So instead of getting all defensive and shutting down, try to listen to what they're actually saying.
Yeah. It's like shift from, blame to appreciation.
Exactly. And, sometimes you can even, like, reframe the request in a more positive way.
Oh.
Like instead of saying, ugh, you never take the trash out.
Right.
You can say, honey, I would really appreciate it if you could help me out by taking the trash out. It would make me feel so loved.
I like that.
So it's just a subtle shift, but it makes a big difference.
Totally. What if you're just feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah.
Like totally overloaded?
It's okay to communicate that. Just say, hey, look, I love you. I want to make you happy, but I'm feeling a little overwhelmed right now. Can we talk about this? Can we find a better way to split things up?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. We were talking about it before, those little love notes.
Oh, yeah.
Combining, like, the act of service with a little written expression.
Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Like, what does that look like?
Well, it's just basically adding, like, a written expression of affection
Okay.
to the act of service. So, like mowing the lawn, leaving a note, hey, I mowed the lawn because I love you.
That's so sweet.
Or I made your favorite dinner tonight because I care about you.
See, that's like a double dose of love.
Exactly. It just shows that, this is not just me doing a chore.
Right.
This is me expressing my love for you.
And, imagine the impact that could have on kids.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If they see their parents doing this for each other.
Absolutely. They learn that love's not just words. It's actions. It's intentions.
That's a really good point. All this talk about love languages and acts of service.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, is there a point where it's too much?
Mm.
Like, are we in danger of going overboard and doing so much that we forget about ourselves?
That's a great question. And again, it comes back to balance, right?
Right.
Healthy relationships are about reciprocity.
Right.
It can't be one person constantly giving and the other constantly taking. It has to be that sweet spot where both people feel loved and appreciated and respected.
And it's almost like self-care isn't selfish.
Right.
It's essential.
It's essential. You got to fill your own cup so you have something to give.
Right.
Otherwise, if you're depleted, you're resentful, then acts of service just become a burden.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's not just about learning your partner's love language.
Right.
It's also about understanding your own.
Absolutely.
And being able to communicate that.
Yeah, you got to be able to have those open and honest conversations where both people can say what they need without being judged.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's about challenging, those societal expectations that we've all kind of bought into.
Oh, totally.
About what a husband or wife should do.
Absolutely. I mean, we might have grown up with these ideas about, like, the man does this, the woman does that.
Yeah.
But, love languages, they go beyond that.
It's really about meeting your partner's individual needs.
Exactly.
Whether those fit into, the traditional categories or not.
Right. And, sometimes stepping outside of those roles can lead to a lot of joy and growth.
Okay.
Like, you can imagine a husband who hates yard work suddenly realizing that he actually loves gardening.
Right.
Because it makes his wife feel good.
Yeah.
Right. Or A wife who never thought of herself as a handy person, all of a sudden figuring out how to fix stuff around the house
That's cool.
because it makes her husband happy. So, it's really about going beyond those traditional roles and expectations.
I love that. It's like those acts of service can be like this gateway
Yes,
to discovering new things about ourselves and our relationship.
absolutely.
Like you might surprise yourself with what you're capable of when you're motivated by love.
That's the key. It's got to be love.
But let's be real, all this learning each other's love languages,
It takes work.
it takes effort. I mean, is it really as simple as just like following a recipe?
Well, it takes work, but it's not, rocket science or anything. Like
Right.
anything worthwhile, it just takes, a little bit of intentionality, a
Yeah.
willingness to kind of learn and grow. Think of it like learning a new language.
Okay.
There's going to be moments of frustration, times when you're like, oh, I can't get this.
Yeah, yeah.
But the more you practice, the more fluent you'll become. And the rewards, they're so worth it.
Yeah. Because speaking your partner's love language can really create this like deep sense of intimacy and connection
Absolutely.
and appreciation. It's almost like you've unlocked this, secret code. Yeah.
To their heart.
You got it. It's a journey.
It is. It's a lifelong journey.
The more we learn about each other, the better we can communicate and, build these strong relationships.
Absolutely. You were talking before about how our criticisms can sometimes reveal our deepest needs.
Yes.
Like, can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, a lot of times, we criticize, but we're not trying to be mean.
Right.
It's really like, coming from a place of, I have this need that's not being met. Like,
Right.
for example, if you're always getting on your partner's case about, helping around the house,
Yeah.
maybe your love language is acts of service
Right.
and you're not feeling appreciated.
It's like they're saying, I need you to show me love in this way, but they're just not saying it very well.
Exactly. And so understanding love languages can be so helpful
Yeah.
because it helps us to really decode
Right.
what our partner's trying to say. So instead of getting all, offended or taking it personally,
Yeah. You can say, oh, okay, this is what they need.
yeah, that's a good point. So the next time you're tempted to lash out or criticize, just pause for a second and say, what am I really trying to say here?
Exactly.
How can I communicate this need in a more loving way?
Exactly. It's about moving from reaction to connection.
I love that. This has been such an insightful deep dive.
It's been fun.
It has. I feel like we just, scratched the surface
Yeah.
of this whole, concept of acts of service.
There's so much more to explore.
There is. But I feel like I've got some good takeaways, some nuggets of wisdom
Yeah.
I can use in my own life. What about you? What resonated with you the most? What's one big takeaway?
I think, for me, it's just that reminder that love is a choice,
Right?
not just a feeling. And that those small acts of service, when you do them with intention,
Yeah.
when you do them with love, they can make such a difference.
It really is the little things.
It's the little things that add up.
So to wrap things up, let's leave our listeners with something to think about, a little homework assignment. What's one act of service you can do this week, to make your partner or loved ones feel appreciated? Think about it. Take action. Even the smallest gesture, like we've been saying, can make a huge difference. And hey, don't forget to check out our show notes.
Oh, yeah. Tons of resources.
We've got links to Chapman's book, other helpful resources, so keep exploring, keep learning, and keep speaking the language of love.